Okay, our next project is an executive desk. It is the final phase of a project that we have been working on in a very large home office / guest room in this gentleman's house. And the desk, which you see here, this is the plan view, this is the elevation on the seating side, and this is the side view. The side view is kind of the quintessential one. It's the one that tells you the most about the desk in this case. Yeah. So here we have an interesting opportunity for a nice little joint, which we'll make, and so the grain direction follows the direction of the pieces of wood. Now, it's a very elegant look. Now, we had to change the proportion a little for this because, as most desks are, this one's 30 inches high, and it's actually 37 inches deep rather than 36, but 6 feet wide. So 6 feet by 37. It's a very standard size for an executive desk. The one thing we're going to have to do is on the leg that is on the front sort of passenger side of this thing, which is here, we're going to plow a 3/4 inch by 1/2 inch groove all the way up the leg. And it'll be plugged later, but that's how we get the wires, the cable, up into it. Apparently that's all it takes. I thought it was going to require much larger cables, but he said, no. So we felt we could make it invisible as far as the wiring, which is a nice feature there. So we need to order this glass in advance because those guys need some time to make it. I have to do a little pattern and draw it for them. Anytime it's anything other than a squared off piece, you have to do a drawing. So, and here we want radiuses here, like a 3/4 inch radius, there and there. That's it. Other than that, it's a 1/4 inch piece of glass polished on all 4 sides, and it sits on top of the sapele plywood. So what I'm going to do first is do these, and then we'll plow some sort of a groove for our joinery in these corners. I also put a very long screw through where it'll never be seen, just to pull it tight forever, so you don't have to worry about it. So what I've done is I've drawn a pattern on MDF. This is it. This is the shape right here. I'm very, very particular about this angle. That had to be precise. It's as precise as I can possibly get it. Okay, we have a 6.5 inch wide piece. These are 4.5 inches. So it doesn't make sense to cut one here, one here, one here. I'm wasting a lot of wood if I do that. What I'm going to do is, you remember we always start in a couple inches from the end because we're going to get a little check and a little uneven drying on the end. So we're going to start a couple inches in, but I'm going to flip this and I'm going to put it here like this. We come in about a 1/4 inch from the rough edge. That's fine. And then remember, this is all fairly approximate, and even the approximate shape and size is going to save us a ton of wood. So now I have that. And as you can see, because we have this nice wedge, I can move this wedge, and I want to leave about a little under a 1/4 inch, maybe 3/16 there. And then I'm going to leave, again, probably about a 1/4 inch there. So I'm going to go about like that. I'm going to actually get both legs out of this one piece, the entire legs, which wouldn't have been possible if I'd done it in a less efficient way. So anyway, by nesting them in there, what I'm going to do is cut it off where I can cut it off. And I'll use the bandsaw to rough out the other cuts. And then I'm going to come back and take them down on the joiner, right up to the line. Well, actually, I forgot a step. We have to plane it so that we have a nice smooth face. And we'll take the jointer to get the long edges correct. And then I'm going to go over, and I've already set up the panel saw at precisely 42 degrees, which is that angle right there. Okay, so now we have our 2 little billets out of the sapele solid. I managed to get it just a 32nd of an inch under 1.5 inches thick. That's pretty good. So these are pretty stout. It's a good thickness. It'll work. Now I have 2 of these legs coming out of each one. It's very generously sized, so I'm going to have no trouble getting them out of there. My next job is to take this, nestle it in there, put that edge right to it. This is the actual edge of the leg before it gets the little round over. So I'm going to put that right up to it like that, and I'm going to mark it where it goes. And then I'm going to cut this one on the chop saw. As I said, I've already set that angle, and that's a very precise angle. Then I'm going to draw this on both pieces. Remember, they're nested like this. And then I'll cut down the middle with the bandsaw. That will separate the two. And then I will clean it up on the joiner so that this outer edge is perfect. Okay, so now here I've drawn the pattern for the stretcher. This angle right here is set on the saw. The angle here is precisely the same. It's going to be the same angle, so I'm going to use the same saw cut, and it will key off the back edge, and on the leg it'll key off this back edge. So that'll have it perfectly because we're at 4.5 inches here and 4.5 inches here. That's why this ends up being a symmetrical angle. And then we have a 39-inch radius. And this is beefy enough. This, in that thickness, that nearly 1.5 inches Sapele, it's going to be a beefy end panel on both sides. And it needs to be, because this is a heavy desk. And people move it around. People, as I said before, people are careless about that. They just drag it. This thing has to be incredibly strong to stand up to that. So our next step is to transfer these dimensions to our last piece of Sapele, and we'll machine those down to the same thickness, of course. Then we'll go over and cut our miters, and then this I will just, so I'll draw it and freehand it on the bandsaw, and then I will take my sander, my big edge sander, and smooth out that edge. So that'll smooth out this curve. One last word about these. This is a set of curves I got years ago. It's called Lyman radius curves. And they go all the way from a very sharp curve all the way to an incredibly gentle one. And I find that these are a big time saver, just to do things like this. In this case, it was long enough to get this in just 2 segments. So I got a nice curve here. You can set up a big compass, thing kind of, but this is a 39-inch radius right here. So that's a pretty big compass. I've had radiuses over 12 feet, and this really makes that, it makes it child's play rather than setting up the damn, compass all the time. So anyway, that's how we arrived at this, and tomorrow morning we start cutting and joining. This is our side panel. We've cut these all out, squared off, but what you're looking at here, it has been rounded on the outside edges. This goes all the way around inside and this curve in the straight. Now I happen to have a shaper head that had that curve on it, so I was lucky there. You can do it with a couple of passes, one on each side. With a router bit, it won't be this nice, but it'll get you there. So if that's the way to do it, if you don't have a shaper or this kind of a shaper head, yeah, you're not sunk. You can still make it happen. The difficult one here, the straight ones were easy because I just set the fence on my shaper and ran them through with the feeder. It was easy. And that gave us this nice round face on both of these. So you want to put that on before you join these together, because once you join them together, you can't do it anymore. Then you have to use the router method. So the tricky one was the curve, this curve here, and part of the reason, design was the reason I went with a straight arc. So what I did is I set it up, as you'll see over there, and I ran this. So we'll take a look over at the shaper. All right, so we had to make this rather unusual looking little fixture to run this piece on, because again, we're running the piece on the face of it. And again, you can see why it needs to be an arc, so that we can run it like this. This is a throwaway piece. After I use it, it's going to go in the dumpster. Anyway, I just thicknessed up a couple pieces, 2 pieces of 3/4, and then I cut it on the bandsaw. I set this on there when it was square. I drew it, cut it on the bandsaw, and I finished sanding it, because this is plywood on the edge. It's not going to slide real well unless you hit it on the sander. The edge sander will make it slide nicely. And then we have to make this rather strange cut in the center to allow for this. So anyway, it worked out pretty well, and I've already cut these because unfortunately my videographer had to be out of town the last couple days when I did this, and I couldn't slow down my progress for that. So I ran them anyway, but I thought I'd come back and we'd just catch the footage to show how we did it. So this just went right through like this. Go about this fast. Remember, when you're coming out on this end, you're coming against the grain. This edge you got no problem. This edge could tear out, but this is a very, very sharp shaper bit, so it's not a problem. So anyway, we put that through, we had that, and now we're going to go and confine our attentions to this joint. I've been thinking about whether I want to use dowels in this or a spline, and at this point I think I have my little horizontal boring machine. I'm going to use dowels in there, and then I'm going to do, and this is what I did on the Copenhagen table to join this together. You really can't clamp it. It's a very difficult thing to try to clamp without having elaborate fixtures to do it. We don't want that. There's only 4 joints like this to make. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take about a 6-inch screw, and I'm going to put it right through perpendicular through the top where it'll never be seen. It'll go right through, and that'll pull the joint together. That with the dowels, it'll never come apart. So that's our next job, is to make the dowel joints in these. All right, so we're ready to complete the joint here in the leg panels. So we've done our dowels, and we have 2 of them, fairly far spread apart, because that's going to give you the most support in there. And now I just need to put a 4 3/4 inch screw right through the middle to pull it together. And the screw helps hold it, but it's really not necessarily the strength of it. It's the glue in there. We're going to use a Gorilla Glue, which is a polyurethane-based glue, and it expands in the hole. So our little dowels, these are standard dowels for furniture construction. And the hole that we drilled for these is a little bit bigger than the dowel. So it's a fairly loose fit in there, but that works well with the Gorilla Glue because it expands. So it will fill that pocket, and this will be rock solid in there. And that joint will never come apart. So that's our next step. I have to drill for that screw, and then we put the glue on the dowels, put it together, and put the screw in it. We do that on all 4 joints. One down, 1 to go. All right, so now that we have completed our leg panels, the next thing I want to tackle is this front curve here. It's a very gentle sweeping arc. It's a true arc, it's not an elliptical thing. Because that would have been more difficult to do. And this is really the look I was after. In this case, I used an old drafting piece of drafting equipment that I got back in the 80s that's called a spline. Here's the spline I'm talking about. It's a large French curve, but you can set it to very gentle curves. So you can get anything that you can eyeball correctly. This thing gets it and holds it, and it's a really nice thing. I don't even know if you can get them anymore, but anyway, that's what I chose to do this curve. Now what I'm doing here is I'm making a template. This is not a piece of the actual desk. This is a template that I'm going to use to cut these parts. So our next step is to cut the bottom panel for the tray, which we'll use this as the front edge. And then I'm going to orchestrate how we put our side panels to the front piece, that joint, and everything else that goes with it. So those are going to be our next steps. Okay, so now we have our template here and our workpiece, which is going to be the bottom of that tray in the front part of the cabinet, the desk. I'm just going to use a pattern routing bit to cut it along here because it's a time saver and it's dead accurate. You can't get better than that. I don't want to be hand sanding or sanding it on the edge sander because it won't be precisely what this curve is. So it's just a pattern routing bit is a router bit that has the bearing on the top of it. If the bearing is on the bottom of it, it's more of a flush trimming bit, is what they're called. So this is purely for pattern routing. It's meant to follow a pattern like this. So our next step is to cut that out, and then we'll start talking about how we're going to curve the front piece and the ends. Okay, so we have this is the bottom panel for the media tray that goes in the front part of the desk. This is going to be the front of the desk. I've decided to make it 6 inches tall, and he needs at least 4 1/4 inches height inside. I guess 4 inches. So this will give him 5 1/4. He'll have a little extra room in there. Anyway, the next question is, how do we get that 6-inch piece to follow this curve? It's a fairly gentle curve. So I've decided to make it out of 1/2 inch. I had some 1/2 inch left over from the rest of the job that we did. So what I want to do is I have taken the overall width of 72 inches of the desk, and I've subtracted the thickness of the legs and also the side panels that go here. And I have ended up with this length, which is 65 1/2 inches. And then the end of this 6-inch piece that I cut, this is the front, the end of it is going to essentially show here. So now the next thing I need to do is I'm going to edge band that end, and I need to decide, obviously at this point, we're going to go vertical because the edge band can only go vertical on this. That means the side panel also will have vertical grain, and the front will have horizontal grain. It may seem a little inconsistent, but I don't think anybody's even going to notice it. I think it'll look great. So I'm not worried about it. But I also, the other thing I want to do edge band now is the bottom edge, which is down under here. This is the time to edge band this, because once it's in a curve form, you can't follow the edge band around the curve. But if I put this skinny little piece of edge band on now, we can curve it and it shouldn't have any effect on it at all. It'll be fine. Okay, so we have our tray. Now we cut our arc. You remember, now I have my little side pieces here that ended up being 11 degree angle to match this angle of the arc at that point. So these are the little side panels on the tray. Now comes the tricky part. We have to take this 1/2 inch plywood, which has These days they put 2 layers of 1/8 inch MDF as the cross banding material. You understand the cross banding material is the layer right underneath the face. So it runs the opposite direction or in traditional plywood. This is MDF board, and I think they use that because it's super smooth and flat, so they can get away with using thinner veneer. So ultimately it makes them money. But this is actually, we've tested it. It's going to bend over this gentle curve quite nicely. And that actually gives it a lot of strength. When you take a wall, a straight wall that might be flimsy, you make it serpentine, it becomes very strong. They used to build walls outside in the colonial times that way. They would build them in a serpentine form, that way they didn't need to put posts down. Anyway, that's a side kind of thing. So this, we're going to do this corner first. We're going to clamp it down. We've already clamped it down, ran it over the curve, and that's how I found out precisely how long it had to be so I could edge band the other end. They're edge banded now. I don't want to try to edge band them after. Now this is tricky and it takes a few pairs of hands because we're going to have to clamp this corner and bend it down, all the way down and clamp that corner and then screw that in place and then let the glue dry. That's the idea. So that's what we're going to do next. All right, so we have completed the leg panels on both sides, obviously. We've completed the component tray, which is in the front part here. Now the next thing we're going to turn our attention to is these pedestals. These are really the last, other than the top, these are the last main component. The pedestal on this side is going to have a top drawer, and this is an open cavity where he's putting a computer tower that he has there. So this gets a door, that gets a drawer frame. We're going to have a pencil drawer in the center, spanning the two, pencil drawer, and then a couple of deep box drawers on the other one. So we're going to make these cabinets right now. I did originally want the back to be angled to match this. As it turns out, it's going to work out a lot better if it's just straight up and down. It'll be fine. It won't make any difference. After we get these components done, we have to get the fronts edge banded all the way around, and then we'll trim them out with the proper slides and all that. Then the glass for this part of the top, this is glass right here, and that is coming in later this week. So then I need to make this curved top and the top piece that goes under the glass. So now we turn our attentions to the two drawer pedestals. Okay, so we have our top here, which is this piece. This is the solid wood top, and it has glass going on top of it. That piece is now upside down on my assembly table because I had to attach these two pedestal units to it. So we have done that. We have spaced it out correctly so that we end up with a 1-inch overhang on the 72-inch width. So we have 67 inches total. So now we have this assembly, which is this, the top, and the pedestal, and also the back panel, which is behind this drawer. That's all sitting upside down right now on the assembly table. We have used pocket screws to attach these to the top. They are essentially hanging from the top, but they are also supported on the outsides by the leg assemblies, by the leg panel assemblies. The particular construction of this plywood, this Sapele plywood, it's almost like they glued the veneer to a Baltic birch, which is a very dense, strong plywood. So the pocket screws are plenty strong to hold it. Ordinarily, I would put some sort of screw blocks on there, but that's plenty in this case. I mean, with an ordinary plywood. This is very strong, it'll work fine. Okay, so our next step is to attach the wire management tray. That's where all the goodies go, that for his computer components and things like that, they go inside that tray. That's the next step, is to attach this to the back of this, and then we're going to upright the whole thing and add the hinged top to that power tray. So we begin by flipping this thing upside down and getting that nail on. Okay, so this is the panel desk leg that is going to go on the wall unit side of the room. That is the less public side. He walks around that to get into the desk or to get into the corner area. There, we designed it so when the floor was done in the room, there was a tombstone in the floor, which is an electrical supply with a cap on it that you can step on. It's usually like a brass cap kind of thing. Anyway, he has his power wires coming up through that and the computer wires coming up through that, and they need to get into the power tray, which mounts about here. The end of the power tray comes out like this. So here we have our little pass-through right here. Now we're going to, we sort of engineered this thing to be deep enough to get his wires through here. They're not very big. I was afraid they were, beastly things, but no, he said they're actually quite small. There's like a 1/4 inch one and like an 1/8 inch one. So they're going in there. So we've cut this slot, and then I have this cap that I made for it. So this cap is going to go right over the slot, and it will trap the wires in there. And it's very nondescript. You won't really see it from a distance. The screws we have for here are almost the same color as that wood. So they should melt right in, and it'll look pretty seamless right there. But this does have to be right on top of that tombstone where the wires come up. So the downside of this is you can't move the desk around. It has one spot and that's it. So, but we've put a lot of thought into where it was going to go, so we should be in good shape there. Now, as the wires come up through this desk leg, they get up. This is almost high enough to get into the power tray, but I really want to bring this up into this horizontal member a little bit. So I'm just going to take a 3/4 inch Forstner bit, and I'm just going to drill a couple of holes with it that go about the same depth as this slot. So that'll make it easier to get through. And then I have to find out where that pass-through area is in, and I have to put that in the end wall of our power tray, because the end wall of the power tree goes right against it, and then I have to make sure I cut that out so it'll come through. But I don't want to cut it out in a way that it would show. So I have to be very careful about that. So our next step is to make sure this is drilled out, and then when I set the power tray on, I'll put this in place so that I know where to cut the end of the power tray. So those are our next steps. mouse hole there, so you should be able to wire everything right down to the floor. Oh, please. Oh, that's really nice.
Very, very nice.
Let's grab the glass, bring it down.